Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Okay, welcome to Meet the Author. My name is Joe Nash, and today we're going to hear about Seat of Power with our author, Gerald FitzGerald. So welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Before we start talking about your book, I always ask people to give us a little capsule biography. I mean, we do have a little bit of our Albany connection, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about where you're from and your life and everything, and then we'll talk about the book.
My family was, both my father and mother were born and raised in Albany. After they got married, they moved to New York City, so we were all raised in the city. But every summer, my brother and two sisters and I spent our summers in Albany with our grandparents. So we've had an Albany connection from very early on. Even after I was married, we came up to Albany for Thanksgiving and Christmas and other holidays. So I feel I'm an Albany person as well as being someone born and raised in the city. My work career has been with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I left there as the Director of Aviation, which put me with responsibility for Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark airports. I then left there and joined a firm called Parsons Brinkerhoff as the president of the firm that was involved in planning and constructing airports. And now I run my own management consulting firm on airport security. Okay. So I'm an airport kind of person, but also I've been a student of history over the years, and I kind of drew on my background in history to kind of put this novel together.
All right, so you're not a writer, obviously. So.
No, this is a first book, and after all the work that's gone into it, it's likely to be my last.
Now the book, I'll just say this only one time because we don't want to talk about this other book, but this book is sort of in the genre of the Da Vinci Code because this book involves politics, religion, the Vatican, etc. So I guess you just told me something very interesting about. You tell us about your book in relation to that, and then we can talk about your book.
Well, there were two things that were really behind this book coming together. The first one was, as a student of history over the years, I see that history often repeats itself in both politics and religion. And with that in mind, I felt a need to express that observation of mine in some kind of a story. And then I took my father's experience here in Albany and used that as the basis of forming a character in this book to bring together a crisis between the Pope and the President, which would be religion and politics, to explain both his background and my own feeling about history.
But just tell us about your father, the connection there.
Okay, the connection with my father, he was born in Albany in 1900, went to the Christian Brothers Academy, and then at the age of 17 decided to join the priesthood for the Diocese of Albany. He went to the seminary for about a year and a half, and then was selected as the one person from the seminary to finish his studies in Rome. So he went off as a young man to the North American College in Rome, which is set aside for students from North America to finish their studies there. A year before ordination, he changed his mind and came back to the U.S. At that point, he joined the Times-Union as a reporter and worked for them for four or 5 years, met my mother at that point, and then got married in Albany and moved to New York City. So that experience as a journalist, combined with his studies in Rome, gave me the basis of the character.
The character is sort of based on your father.
It is. It is.
Well, you've taken on this topic, religion, politics. These are the biggies. And why do you think this genre that the Da Vinci Code started, and you're another one, but why do you think this genre, I don't know what you could call it, why do you think it's so popular, that have these big politics, religion connections?
Because I think when it comes to religion, people have yet to figure out the answer, and they're always searching. And I think you'll find that people, regardless of their education and background, at some point in their life, they're not satisfied with the answer that organized religions give them, and they find a need to search. And what this book does, it brings in historic facts about religion in general, and concludes that all religions have some value to it, and until we all sit down and talk to each other, we're never going to connect the dots. In the meantime, people will search for answers, whether it's a Da Vinci Code search in a painting, hiding some other secret, or it's a conviction that the Vatican has been holding secrets for centuries, not wanting to tell people. Whatever it is, this conspiracy theory is always alive in our civilization. And I think religion offers the greatest opportunity for conspiracy theories.
Well, one thing that comes up in these books, and in your book too, is people can't handle the truth, or the faith will be shattered. What do you, I mean?
You see, I think people rely too much on others and on institutions to give them answers. And any kind of institutional organized answer is usually constructed by the people in charge to serve their purpose, not necessarily give you the answer you want. Yeah. So I think institutions like politics and religion provide a service, but it's always left up to the individual to make their own judgment as to whether that answer is satisfactory.
Okay. So what are, in your book, you use the Knights, there's a Knights Templar and the Cathedral at Chartres and all these other, tell us about some of these real historical facts that you've used around the fictional story.
I think if you look on other successful novels, and one of my favorite is Winds of War.
Okay. Yeah.
And here is history repeated around a novel. But you have two things of interest. You are repeating facts in history as these characters search for meaning in their own lives. This is a similar book. So I've taken historical facts about religion and politics and tried to connect them at the time that the characters in the book are struggling with a current crisis. So, for instance, I try and make a relationship between the Cathedral at Chartres and what went on that site thousands of years before.
Before the
Christian era. And yet, the people who were Druids put a temple on that site to the Black Madonna. And then you find out that the Romans tore down their temple and built a Roman temple on that site. Then you find out Christianity did the same thing. So there's something going on that particular site, and why do they do that? And then you find out this cathedral that was built by the offspring of the Knights Templar, being the Masons. They constructed the cathedral on the same site for religious purposes, but also for other purposes. What were those other purposes? You look at the stained glass that's on the cover of the book. It's the only stained glass in any cathedral in the world that has
a Christian.
I think anyone.
Okay.
Certainly Christians, but I wouldn't think that other non-Christians would even have stained glass, but they might. Any Christian cathedral, signs of the zodiac in stained glass. That is, there's a message there that you know what? Yes, religion is important, but there are many aspects to people's understanding of creation since the dawn of civilization, and none of them should be ignored. Yeah. And you take this, and then you put together in the book the fact that when the Temple of Solomon was destroyed by the Romans in 72 AD, and the Roman historian Josephus went into the Temple of Solomon before it was torn down, he sees the Holy of Holies, and on the veil are the 7 signs of the zodiac. So you have Jewish tradition, Christian tradition, plus before the Christian era, all tied into the signs of the zodiac. Does that mean anything? It means it's a question. Yeah. There's a question that people have found things. And then you go to the Christian Bible, and certainly the wise men coming to Bethlehem, they were astrologers from the east following the stars. Is there a message in the heavens for us? Leave that up to you to decide.
Well, I think in my upbringing as a Catholic, I mean, we were always told astrology, you know.
Except in the Bible in Bethlehem.
That's right. I mean, that's what you bring out in the book.
That's right.
That's right. They do say the word astrologer is in.
Astrologers from the East. Now, what's happening? You think about it. They came from what I would describe today as Islam. So what happened at the dawn of Christianity? Who was there? Representatives from Muslim countries came to Bethlehem. Is there a message that maybe we all should be together in our pursuit? I think there's more to this than people realize. I think history has been buried in certain areas because of religious cooperation. In the book, I speak to an era where Christian, Jewish, and Islamic scholars sat together in Spain at a rabbinical school and shared their understanding of religious
beliefs. And
then
this is a true historical fact.
This is a fact,
okay.
And it's referred to in the book. So throughout the book, we're saying on religion and politics, religious people very frequently got together and spoke to each other. But then, for reason of politics, they were brought apart, and it's better to war with each other for political reasons than to be at peace.
So they had sort of an ecumenical spiritual council there, and
they did. So I try and take these historical facts on religion and bring them up to the current time, having people question. you know, what about the value of religion? And I think every religion has its value. And until we sit down and talk to each other, we're not going to find
Well,
out
tell
the
us
answer.
about, in the book, you mentioned this meeting of the different faiths. Was it called the Mystery School? Or?
The Mystery School is separate from that. The three faiths met in Spain at a rabbinical
Okay,
school.
yeah.
But the Mystery School of Charters was something formed by the religious leaders in Europe, and political leaders in Europe, rather, who had collected these religious secrets that they so-called had, which goes back to today's Da Vinci Code. What about the secrets that someone has? So Da Vinci Code today is only a reflection of 400 years ago what the people in those times were still searching for, religious secrets. Religious relics were considered to be power. Why? Because they, in fact, could control someone's eternal life, not their material life. Same thing 400 years ago, same thing today.
And what was that in the book? There's a quote, something like, it's easier to control someone if you...
Yes, it's easier to control someone if you threaten their soul than threaten their life.
Their current life.
So, I mean, if I just kill you, it's one thing, but if I tell you I'm going to condemn you to hell for all eternity, you might pay attention to me.
Now, in your research for this book, did you go to Jerusalem and Chartres and Spain?
Well, fortunately, during my aviation business, and particularly being an aviation consultant in Parsons Brinkerhoff, I had a reason to travel to Jerusalem and Washington and Rome and other cities around the world, and Paris. So I was able to visit the sites mentioned in the book. So I've actually been there, walked the streets, and felt the significance of these places that I've put in the book.
Now, was there one thing that really piqued your interest in starting the story, you know, the germination of the...
Well, I think it's this clash between politics and religion, and the similarity between a pope and a president, and that they both say one thing and do another.
I know.
I think that's part of the story, but I think it's wrapping this story around historic facts to let people understand that people who sit in the seat of power may or may not be the ones in control, and when they are, their pronouncements may very well be for their own purposes and not for the purpose
Well,
of the
as an
institution.
example of this, you were here speaking today. Could you tell us that little thing, the little scene in the book about the Pope and the President saying one thing and doing...
Well, you say that the president says, as you might imagine, if the president was running for re-election and Osama bin Laden was suddenly given sanctuary in the Vatican, his answer would be, well, you know, one man is not the answer to terrorism. Our war on terrorism is much bigger than one man, so no, we don't care that he's in the Vatican. And then he finishes the press conference and goes to the CIA and says, you better go get that guy out of the Vatican because I want to be reelected. So he says one thing and does another. The Pope, on the other hand, says, well, we've given sanctuary to the terrorists.
This is in the novel.
In the novel, because we'd like to have a new role in the Mideast peace process. But the real reason is the terrorist has threatened to reveal church secrets unless he's given sanctuary. So are both of those actions plausible? Yes. Because I think as institutional leaders, they are obliged to say one thing for the absorption of the people who want to hear it, and then do something else for their own purposes. I don't think that's unusual. It hasn't been unusual in history, and we should understand as people today that goes on as we speak.
So what do you find, is your book sort of just, I don't want to say it, not a warning, but what is it? You're just trying to say we should, what, think for ourselves, or?
I think in certain areas you have to think for yourself. I think in terms of religion, which is the great puzzle to most people. I mean, some people conclude that they do because others believe a certain thing, and they say, well, I might as well believe that. And yet they lack the conviction maybe to act each day on that conviction. So religion is still a problem today to whoever you really speak to. I'm trying to say in the book, respect other people's understanding of their religious practices and not, oh, well, I have the answer, therefore I'm better than you are. I refer in the book to the problem between Belfast and Baghdad. You have the Belfast situation, which is a religious controversy, and you have the same thing going on in Baghdad. You have religion at the heart of most political conflicts. So if people understand religion better and respect one another, perhaps the opportunity for conflict might be
Well, you
reduced.
said something interesting today when you were speaking about your book. You said, my religion is not the politics.
That's right. My religion is my belief in my faith. It's not tied into institutional politics. So if they make a decision tomorrow about how many angels dance on the head of a pin, that some theologian has decided, that doesn't influence my beliefs. It could be of institutional importance, but institutional importance is not necessarily my belief in what I'm here for.
Well, speaking of institutions, one interesting part of your book, you talk about how the divine right of kings came about. Why don't you tell us that story?
If there is not a better example of religion in politics, if you go back into history, you find out that at the time, people were starting to say, wait a second, we should have a parliament. We shouldn't just have the king ruling us. The people should have a voice. And by the way, who made him king? The church comes out and says, oh, wait a second. There is the divine right of kings because God has produced this baby, and it was God who put him here. So therefore, we should never question the king. He's there.
And his descendants.
Divine right. Now, amazingly, at the same time, the church is given thousands of acres of land and declared to be princes of the church. They're not just cardinals now. Now they're princes of the church. So they gain status politically by supporting the king's right to rule on some religious grounds. Example, that's just one example. History is filled with these examples between religion and politics. We need to understand that in our own search for religion.
Let's see. We talked about, in your book, Albany plays a prominent part. You mentioned Lincoln Park specifically and CBA and all these things. Tell us why did you have the main character have these Albany memories?
Well, the story really begins with three teenagers in Albany as seniors in high school trying to figure out, what should I do with my life? And I think seniors in high school always go through that challenge. Where should I go to school? What do I want to be when I grow up? How do I answer this question? And it's in the 60s, right after Kennedy gives his speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So these are three children, three youngsters trying to figure it out. Two guys and a girl hanging out in Lincoln Park, okay? And then you go forward 15 years and you find out the two who they thought were going to be together, the hero and the girl, he goes off to be a priest because of family politics. She marries his best friend, and 15 years later they show up in Washington together. But there's something about the Albany beginning, the simplicity of life, the quiet of the surroundings, the support of friends and family, that at the end of the book, the hero, after being involved in Washington politics and terrorism in Rome, decides, I'm taking my family and going back to Albany, because all things being said and done about the world global stage, there's something about real life in Albany that is what he wants. So I think of that as my impressions of Albany as a young person, and how I view it now, having lived in New York City and visited Albany so frequently. I do see it as sort of an oasis. Maybe that's something from somebody who doesn't live here every day, but I see that image of Albany that I put in the book.
The part about the institutions you were talking about a minute ago, if you study history, and you study history, I try to read a lot of history, it doesn't seem to be changing. I don't know. Do you think there's hope for?
And I think that's the message of the book is it's not changing. And if you look at the quotes on the back of the book, the lust of power is the most flagrant of all the passions. That's a Roman historian who's saying that. And then you go down and you see power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I've heard that quote so often, and yet I had to go find out it was from Lord Acton. How many people know it's from Lord Acton? But you hear that. So people are aware that power corrupts, and yet in Washington today, we have centralized power that is taking advantage more than what most people understand. But just be aware, this is nothing new. When power has been centralized in the past, those people in power ran off with it. Happening again, and it's happening throughout history. So don't be surprised. I'm trying to make a point here that people should look at history and they'll have a better understanding of what's happening today.
Well, one part of your book, with all these institutions, you have the vice president and the CIA and the Army and et cetera, and the Vatican. But not only do you have these people playing politics, but You have all these little double crosses sort of
There's
going on.
everybody double-crossing everybody. And why is that? Because that's true. Because whether you're involved in politics in your office or in your church or in your local country club, always people trying to make alliances. Alliances are the basis of power structures. And as soon as you find out where your alliances are, and in the book I make the point that the hero's first alliance was with his mother, against his father's desire to send him to West Point. He didn't want to go to West Point, and his first lesson was he couldn't beat his father alone, but he beat his father with his mother. Unfortunately, his mother wanted to be a priest, and he felt that was a better choice than going to West Point. Alliances are the key to power structure control.
Well, you have in the book, there's a minor character, I think in the CIA, who makes an alliance with the vice president that turns out to be kind of important.
It isn't important. He's trying to make an alliance for his own purposes. He's the deputy director of the CIA. No mistake making him the deputy director. Having an alliance with the vice president. What happens in the seat of power? Deputies and assistants wind up controlling the seat of power.
Now,
that happens.
And speaking of seat of power, which is the title of the book, you have some ideas about when there is someone in a seat of power. Tell us about, because all through the book, the different seats of power you talk about, and the person sitting there and who it might be.
Well, they say for the Pope in the Vatican, the most important person in the Vatican is the person who gives the Pope his napkin at each meal. Because what happens is, here's your napkin, and oh, by your way, could you sign this little paper for me while you're at it? Those are the people who have the power, and it can be the least obvious.
Like Radar O'Reilly on MASH. He ran the whole...
That's right. So in the seat of power, I'm trying to say, sometimes it's the person who's sitting there, but most often the people in control are the ones who surround him. And that's something we should be aware of.
Or are behind
the scenes. And you don't even know who they are.
Well, the real... you seem to be saying in your book that the real people with power don't want it to be known that they're...
That's exactly right. And think about people who, in political parties, who decide who the congressman will be or who the senator will be, and we never know who they are. And whether it's in the state legislature and someone remains in power for 30 years in control of the Assembly of the Senate, and how do they stay there so long, and how do they exercise the power, we really don't know.
Well, at the end of the book, the book goes on all these little ideas with religious secrets and different religions getting together, but you ultimately, at the end, I can't say you reveal any grand secrets in the sense of maybe like in the Da Vinci Code with the bloodlines and all that, but what is it you're sort of saying what is it you're trying to say at the end? Because
I'm trying to say at the end that there should be an awareness to religious secrets and what they mean, how they were constructed. There should be an awareness to the value of religion wherever it might be found in the world. And you should be aware that whether it's religion or politics, the institutions are being manipulated.
Because I think the secrets in your book are basically that the other religions were getting together, meeting, and just talking. And somehow they were trying to keep that from everyone.
They stopped that religious cooperation for political purposes. They were able to use religion as an excuse to go over and take somebody else's land away from them. And the leaders wanted to do that. And that's been the history of our civilization, that religion has been used as an excuse. And that's just a fact. And then you have to understand that. As I say, I come back to Belfast and look at that religious controversy that's going on for so long and the intolerance there, and then go into the Middle East and see the same thing. And if, in fact, we could just not have religious intolerance, the world would be a different place. The Mark Twain quote, man has made a graveyard of the globe in trying his best to smooth his brother's path to heaven. I mean, Mark Twain himself. Man has made a graveyard of the globe trying to smooth his brother's path to heaven.
Well, I think besides in religion, you're talking about in politics also. I mean, look at today it seems almost impossible that the sides can get together and talk. And in some instances, it seems like the extremists on both ends, they don't want to get together. And
They don't want to get together. And I think, again, that's history, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. And the battle that's being waged is a battle for power. It's for what one group is in power. When they get out, they abuse the other group. And when they get in, they go back and abuse the people who abuse them. It is an endless cycle. But people should just be aware. They should be aware that throughout history, this is nothing new.
Okay, well, that may be a good way to end it. The book is Seat of Power. I'll just tell people watching, it's very exciting, very intriguing, fast-moving, and Gerald FitzGerald, you can get the book at Borders or Amazon, and it's got some Albany connections in there, and so thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
I very much enjoyed being here.
Okay.
Thank you. Great.
Well, that's it for Meet the Author this time, and we'll see you next time.